Finally some good content for today. So, what happened recently? What happened is that Blizzard gave us a first look at the Dragonflight Talent System. We only got a tiny snippet back when Dragonflight was being announced, but today what we get is a fully fledged and complete list of talent choices for all of the Druid specs and all of the Death Knight specs. So there will be time later on in future videos to nerdgasm about every one of these specs, going into detail and theory craft about possible builds for the specs and whatnot, but for today let's keep it general, let's keep it comprehensive, also because very likely by the time Dragonflight is out 8-9 months from now, quite a lot of these talents will have changed drastically, so let's not put too much importance into that. Instead, let's put importance into the talent tree itself and how it looks and how it works, because in case you don't remember or you have forgotten already, the talent system is going to be split into two. Let's just pick a better image than this. Here it is. Talent system is going to be split into two, and you will have at your disposal 31 points to spend here and 30 points to spend in the specific spec, so the balance in this case. Of these 31 and 30 points, a couple of them will be given to you for free depending on your spec. For example, if you start as a balanced druid, Starfire and Star Surge are given to you for free. Also, you will need to reach 8 points of talent options before you can enter this row, and then 20 points before you can enter the last row. These are the general rules of the talent system. Another few specifications is that the squares are always abilities. As you can see here, square is always an ability, and then circle is always a passive effect. Then you have the hexagons, the one with the 2 arrows right here, which is a dual choice option talent. So you get to choose between Wild Charge or Tiger Dash, Mass Roots or Vortex, etc, etc. So this is how your talent system is going to work out. Now, we have already gotten quite the feedback from the player base, from the community, and I have to say I have been quite surprised about the genre, the type of responses, because quite a few of them seem to be critical and skeptical and generally defeatist and quite gloomy about this system. Many of the players seem to be annoyed at the fact that many of these talents are going to be things you already have. So the general point of complaint was, Blizzard is trying to sell this as a new talent system when all they are doing is just taking away stuff from us, taking away our passives, our abilities and whatnot, and then just repurposing them as a talent system. For example, in here, in the general Druid tree, you can see that if you were a Resto Druid, you would have to go back and pick your Innervate. You wouldn't have it anymore by yourself. You would have to go and pick up something like Wild Growth again. You won't have it by default. You won't have Sunfire by default. You won't have Typhoon or Vortex anymore. So there are quite a few things, even more so if you go to Balance, for example. As a Balanced Druid, you have to actually spec into Celestial Alignment. You have to actually take Solar Beam, and then plenty of your talents are repurposed into new talents, you know, Shooting Stars, Star-Lord, Solstice, Soul of the Forest, Stellar Drift, yeah, plenty of the older talents and effects being brought back in. So I think this is quite the confusing point of complaint, because if you look at this, you should already see, especially if you're a Druid player, you should already be quite excited about all of the possibilities being shown by this talent setup. For example, imagine you are a Balanced Druid. Nowadays, Balanced Druid is going to have Solar Beam as their source of interrupt, and then they might get into Typhoon. That's about it. However, with this new system, as a Balanced Druid, you can go down this route and take Skull Bash, which is an interrupt. On top of your Solar Beam as a Balanced Druid with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with 7 points, which will also give you Frenzied Regen, which is quite good, and 6% more armor, you will also be getting Skull Bash. Not to mention, you can go down this route and take Mighty Bash, which is a single target stun, and you can still retain your Vortex from down here. So a lot of these things already are in the game, except this one isn't for Balanced Druid, this one isn't for Balanced Druid, and now you can get them for Balanced Druid, and I forgot a returning thing, no longer PvP limited, which is Cyclone. So you would have a lot of options, a lot of chances to select what you want to do as a Druid. For example, imagine if instead of being Mythic Plus, where all of this stuff is quite good, imagine if this was a raid. Imagine if you're fighting a single target boss with no adds and no crowd control possible. What is the point? If that were the case, then you don't need Solar Beam anymore, you don't need Typhoon, you don't need Mighty Bash, you don't need Vortex, you don't need Cyclone, you don't need Interrupts. So you can just bring those points that you spend for utility, for crowd controlling, and put them somewhere else. For example, what if instead of spending 1 point in Skull Bash and 1 point in Cyclone, you put 2 points into 15% more move speed, which is very good in the raid? What if instead of going down the Mighty Bash or the Vortex row or the Skull Bash down here, you go and take Thick Hide, which is 6% less damage taken, which is very good also in raiding as well. So you do have the option to specify, to change how you want to play, which is much more diverse than what we have right now. I know that the initial reaction, for some players at least, is to get quite disappointed and annoyed at seeing so many of the talents being things they currently already have in the game. So they're like, dude, why is Heart of the Wild so deep down when right now it's like a third row talent, very easy to take? What about Sunfire? You are telling me that I can spec into balance, yeah, but I can not take Moonkin Form, I cannot take Sunfire or improve Sunfire, right? What kind of balance spec is that? Well, you get what you asked for many times, which is diversity and agency. So you have the option to choose now. Yes, you would be a fool to spec into something like that, but at least now you have the option. No doubt there are going to be plenty of memes made because of players' mistakes, right? It's very possible that you will enter a Mythic Plus key with a balanced Druid, and the balanced Druid will not even have Solar Beam. And they still won't have Skull Bash, they still won't have Mighty Bash, they won't have Mass Roots or Vortex whatsoever. Maybe you enter a raid, you expect your balanced Druid who is raiding to have Stampeding Roar and to have Innervate. Yeah, these are gonna be musts for raiding, and then they won't have them because they will not spec into these two. It's possible. However, you have the choice. That is what you should always be positive towards, having more choice. It doesn't matter if it is possible for players to basically make the wrong choice, to be less optimal, because at the very least now you can choose. Before you couldn't. Before it's not that you could choose to have or not have Stampeding Roar, to have or not have Solar Beam in favor of other things. Now you can, and choice is always better. And some people were also a little bit fearful of comparing this talent tree system to what we had in vanilla. Oh well, look at how many points we have to choose from. A lot of these are going to be very boring. A lot of these are going to be 1 or 2% increased chance to hit type of boredom. It is quite good. Several of these, even while being just percentage increases, are quite powerful. Yeah, this one for example, 6% more spell damage, this one is 5 more yards to your max range, this one is 6% more healing done and healing taken, 6% less damage taken, you have 15% more movement speed, 6% more armor and physical damage taken, 1 minute cooldown to your Stampeding Roar. So you do have a list of, even if they're passives, even if they're small passives, they are still quite good to take and to spec into. Now Blizzard themselves seemed quite conscious of the fact that players might have gotten very confused about this system, which is why they came up with a whole basically preemptive about some of the more likely to be had questions. For example, some abilities are critical to my rotation. Will that mean I always have to build a certain way? No. The most basic building blocks of your rotation will tend to be either learned from levels 1 to 10, so in this big bulk, awarded automatically in the class tree, so if you choose balance, or placed at the top of your spec tree as a first point spent in that tree. In other cases, major abilities that we expect to be part of most builds will be near the start of a tree or on an easily accessible path so that they don't constrain your other choices. We have the list here. A good example obviously is Moonkin Form. Moonkin Form is right after your mandatory picks. In fact, you can't go anywhere after you pick those two. The only one you can go next is Moonkin. So it's obviously a must pick. If you go into the balance tree, you're gonna have the 2 improved eclipses right next to Starfall here and Celestial Alignment here. 2 of your default abilities are gonna be right at the start, and you will need 8 points in these first ones, so it's very easy to take them anyways. And then likely the most asked question or complaint, which is, doesn't this all mean that I will use some of my points to rebuy some things that were baseline in Shadowlands? The answer is, for all the reasons mentioned above, making a huge swath of abilities open to player decision making requires this. You cannot possibly have a talent tree this big where you have to spend 61 points and there is something like 90 options to take, and expect every single one of these options to not be something you already had before. Try to imagine every single one of these being extra on top of your currently existing balanced druid build. How bloated would you be? How many extra buttons would you have and extra passive effects would you have if this were all on top of what already existed? Of course they had to take something back, take something away from what you had at the start. They continue saying, we hear this feedback as primarily a concern about having much less stuff that you had in Shadowlands. After starting with your basic class and spending 61 points in a tree, will you feel pruned? Will you feel like this is actually less than what we had before? Openly, our goal is that you don't. We will be watching for feedback. Our goal is for Dragonflight character to feel like it has a similar amount of power and complexity as a Shadowlands character. But the main difference worth stressing, let's just stress it. The main difference is you getting to choose which active buttons and passive bonuses make up that toolset. That is the most important part. Perhaps with a cookie cutter completed build, which maybe goes down this, does something like this, and then branches here, does something like this or so, right? And then you go balanced druid, you do something like this, yeah. In a cookie cutter build, which will spread out somewhat like this, in this cookie cutter build you might successfully replicate what you already had in Shadowlands, right? Basically you made a copy of everything you already had in Shadowlands. So effectively nothing changed. You could complain that we are getting a new system, it's getting touted as a new great new system for talents, but eventually I just got the same things I had in Shadowlands. The key difference is that this is not all. The key difference is that you will be able to cancel this one and then go this way instead. The main difference is that you will be able to cancel this entire line down this row and decide to go more bear heavy, more feral heavy down this road. That is the main difference. Even though you can likely perhaps go down the similar pattern of talents and options that you had in Shadowlands, you still will be able to change. You still will be able to diversify based on the content you are doing, which is 100 times, perhaps 115 times better than what we have now. Choice, options, variety, agency, freedom. Use whichever term you want. This is a much better system than what we have in Shadowlands, and this is not to mock or to berate what we have in Shadowlands. I think the 3-option talent row system has been working fine since it came out. It's not something particularly bad, but this system is so much better. I can guarantee you can quote me on this, I will quote myself on this by the way, that there is not going to be a situation like many people fear where we are just going to copy what the top players do. In case you don't know, you will be able to save and import your different talent builds for different activities. So we will be able to go into this site and import all the talent builds of top players and then just stick with them. I can guarantee you 100% this is not going to happen, ever. There is simply too much variety and too many options for too many different activities for this to become a thing. You know, if that were to happen, then the top build you would copy wouldn't just be one build, it would be 6 or 7 or 8. It would be the build for Mythic Plus during Sanguine or during Fortified or doing Raging, and then the build for Mythic Plus if you need single target, and then the build for Mythic Plus if you need AoE, the build for raiding if you still need interrupts, the build for raiding if you don't need interrupts but you want to be faster, you want faster movement, faster cooldown of Stampeding Roar, the build for PvP. So there are going to be plenty of different builds that will make up the overall look of this system, which is going to work much better than what we have now. This was the point for today, the general overall look at this talent system. As I said, we haven't really gone too much in detail into all of the different talents because there is 7 specs to have all of this stuff out, so we will go over them slowly, one after the other over time, but for now I just wanted to take a break and look at the general announcement about talent system, because I do believe I am fully committed to my Hopium reserves on this. I believe it's an amazing system for players. It's going to give you lots of freedom, lots of variety, something you have not gotten in years. So many customizable options. So many of these features, for example, used to be soulbind or conduits or legendary effects, which are now cooked into one. So you can mix and match, you can pick them and drop them however you want to. They're not going to be tied to grinding, they're not going to be tied to time gating, they're not going to be tied to RNG. It's all stuff you will get by default in your talent tree. So I think it's a great system that we will get to see in Dragonflight. Of course, what will make it or break it is obviously the balancing. Perhaps the balancing will be awful, so even though the trees look great, the balancing will leave a sour taste in many specs' mouths. So I'm hoping that's not gonna happen, but at the very least, the architecture, the skeleton of this system looks great at this moment. So with this being said, we can leave each other on this Saturday, yeah? Thank you guys again, of course, for watching the video and for helping to grow the channel, which includes liking and commenting, as well as subscribing to this channel. No limits for today. It's an open day for subscriptions. I am also available on Twitter over here if you want to follow me. Even more tweets by the day. I'm shocked. I am shocked even more by my proficiency. And then you can also support me on Patreon somewhere in this direction if you want to join my Discord and hang out together doing nothing, really. But if you want to, go ahead. Thank you guys again. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, no, I mean it. I am full Hopium on this. I think it's amazing. It's a great system.